Story 1. The Relentless Observer, unbroken flow. The tempestuous downpour assaulted the roofing structure relentlessly, an insistent percussion. The subterranean chamber was a confined, frigid space, emitting the malodorous scent of decaying timber and damp earth. 4 individuals were congregated around the antiquarian Ouija planchette. A solitary, insufficient incandescent bulb illuminating the disquieting seance. Liam, our resident skeptic, maintained a tenuous contact upon the triangular indicator, his demeanor radiating profound disbelief. Proceed with the interrogation. Maya, Liam mandated, this spectral entity must elucidate the precise location of my missing automotive keys. Maya, who had painstakingly recovered the artifact from her matriarch's dusty repository, admonished him, exhibit deference. Liam, we must uphold the established protocols. Sam, situated diametrically opposite, displayed an air of concentrated intensity, while Chloe, positioned proximate to my left, was a portrait of apprehension. Her hand visibly trembling, I deplore the decision to acquiesce to this endeavor. Chloe faltered, her voice barely audible, it is merely a recreational diversion. I countered, attempting a reassurance I did not internally possess. An innocuous parlor trick, Liam offered a derisive snort. The perpetual ideomotor phenomenon, our subconscious propels the movement. Maya, initiate the communication. Maya closed her eyes, drew a deliberate breath, and articulated the query. Is there a sentient presence herein that desires dialogue with our party? A protracted silence ensued, punctuated only by the monotonous rhythm of the deluge. Then, the planchette shuddered, commencing a slow, unwavering trajectory toward the affirmative designation. Yes. The ensuing silence was one of absolute realization. Liam's previous cynicism entirely dissipated, his grip now rigidly unyielding. Remarkable, Sam murmured, it executed a movement. An involuntary muscular spasm, Maya insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Pray tell. Identify yourself, entity. The planchette moved with alarming celerity, inscribing an arc of unsettling malignancy, MARAX. Maya deciphered, her voice reduced to a disembodied whisper. Marax, I reiterated, momentarily distracted by the absence of my cellular communication device. A familiar specter, a rather improbable appellation. Liam observed, his attempt at flippancy a brittle defense. His knuckles blanched white. Marax, Sam addressed the board, his inquisitiveness now the dominant sentiment. What is your objective? The planchette engaged in a frenzied oscillation between GOODBYE and HELLO before ultimately resting upon the numerical column 1986. Chloe tremulously declared, the year of your demise. Maya speculated, yes, the mechanism of your passing. Liam inquired, his engagement now complete, the planchette paused, then executed a series of sharp, percussive movements, spelling with unnerving distinctness, OBSERVER. A cold, suffocating apprehension enveloped us. It was not death that claimed it, but mere observation. This exceeds the bounds of comfort. Chloe lamented, attempting to retract her hand. Marax. The purpose of your surveillance, Sam demanded. The pointer ascended to the SUN and then the MOON. Then proceeded to the periphery of the apparatus, stopping precisely upon a minute. Blemished fissure in the wood, Maya gasped, that is the exact locus where I inadvertently dropped the implement. Liam's countenance was ashen. We must terminate this experiment. Utter the farewell, and sequester the board. Hold. I intervened, driven by a reckless need for incontrovertible validation. Marax, if your presence is verifiable, furnish us with undeniable proof. I felt the planchette grow rigid beneath my finger. The rain's sound dissipated into the vacuous tension we had engendered. The planchette commenced a slow, methodical traverse toward the time indicators. Pointing to the 2 feet, then A, then M, 2 a.m., Chloe articulated. Her respiration interrupted. It moved again. WAIT. We remained immobilized. Anticipating. The ancestral clock upstairs marked the passage of momentous minutes. At precisely 1:59 a.m., the planchette executed a final, emphatic dart, resting upon the D, and vibrating with palpable eagerness. Then, with a sudden, acoustic detonation, the inadequate light source above us shattered. Absolute darkness instantly consumed the basement. The sole remaining sounds were the shards of glass striking the concrete and Chloe's sharp, throttled shriek. We floundered our way out, utilizing the luminescence of Maya's mobile phone, abandoning the board and the scattered planchette precisely where they lay. We offered no valediction, no movement to the designated marker. We simply retreated, upstairs, within the reassuring ambience of the brightly lit culinary area. We began our slow process of reconstitution. Liam was the most visibly traumatized. Chloe was inconsolable. It was not a deception, Liam repeatedly asserted. The chronological precision, the foreknowledge of the board's impairment, it possesses esoteric cognizance. And the incomplete final word, Sam mused, the initial phoneme was D. It is irrelevant, Maya decreed, already investigating methods for the disposal of the malign artifact. We are concluded, we extinguish it tomorrow, and we relegate the incident to oblivion. But Mirax was indubitably not concluded. The next day, Chloe could not dislodge the persistent shivering. She felt perpetually scrutinized. An ephemeral, unnerving entity hovering just outside her peripheral awareness. She repeatedly observed the outline of a tall, indistinct silhouette in specular surfaces. That evening, Liam's long-dormant digital chronometer became activated. Its digital display was flashing sanguine, irrevocably stalled at 2 a.m. He located it, connected and concealed, within the central compartment of his vehicle, the same keys he had been unable to locate the prior night. Sam began to perceive a faint, Zerotic whispering whenever he found himself in solitude. Always originating from a distant point and progressively approaching. He could never discern the lexical content, only the acoustic contour. Which was a chilling replica of the exploding bulb's percussion. For me, the dreadful epiphany was the most protracted and excruciating. 2 weeks subsequent to the commencement of the board session. While viewing an electronic transmission, I caught my resemblance in the darkened screen. And I saw it. A subtle, minute alteration upon my person. On my cheek, inferior to my right oculus, was a tiny, barely perceptible marking. It was a curvilinear trace. A small, dark crescent, situated precisely where the planchette had lingered upon the apparatus. The final word the board had been delineating, the word interrupted by the ensuing darkness and the fracturing light, suddenly achieved coherence within my mind. It was DONE, or perhaps, merely, DOC, and the subtle crescent upon my face. I realized it was not a random mark. It was the curved apex of the triangular planchette, indelibly imprinted upon my flesh. The physical cornerstone that had executed its autonomous transit and transported Mirax into our collective existence. The observer was no longer merely scrutinizing us. It had designated a receptacle, and now, it was simply awaiting the opportune moment for its utilization. I have not yet informed the others. I am mortally afraid that should I disclose the truth, I will, irrevocably, be DONE. Story 2. The Annex Artifact. Rapid possession draft. The old rental house, which the students simply called the Annex, was a monument to academic neglect, situated 3 blocks off campus and reeking faintly of mildew and ancient pizza. It was October, and the 4 of us, Theo, the pragmatic leader, Ben, the eternal cynic, Jess, the resident history major. And Clara, the artist with perpetually wide, nervous eyes, were celebrating the end of midterms with bad takeout and the kind of aggressive boredom only college life can produce. "We need something weird," Ben declared, kicking at the dusty floorboards of the cramped living room. "Something that feels like the house wants us to leave." Jess, perched on the arm of a worn velvet sofa, tapped her phone. "The house is weird enough. It was built in 1904, survived 2 campus fires, and rumor has it a student vanished here in the 50s. Clara, however, wasn't listening. She was staring at a patch of wall behind the bookcase, a section that didn't quite match the rest of the faded plaster. "That panel looks loose. It took 20 minutes, a butter knife, and a lot of dust, but they managed to pry open the rectangular section. Inside the shallow cavity, wrapped in brittle, yellowed muslin, was a wooden box. It wasn't stained or painted. The surface was rough, scarred with burn marks. Inside, nestled on crimson felt, lay a talking board. It was clearly homemade, crafted with unnerving care. The letters A through Z were deeply carved and filled with black ink, as were the numbers 1 through 0. In the corners were the standard yes, no, goodbye, and small, stylized images of a sun and a moon. The accompanying planchette was a simple, triangular piece of polished slate, warm to the touch even in the cold air of the annex. "Well, there's your weird," Ben muttered, stepping back. "Burned wood and a piece of graveyard slate. This isn't a parlor trick. This is an antique curse." Theo felt a knot of cold skepticism twist in his stomach. "No, we are not doing this. This is the oldest, cheapest form of psychological parlor game. We are not going to spend the rest of the semester being paranoid." But curiosity, as it always does, won. Clara was already lighting the 4 mismatched pillar candles she kept for her art studio, arranging them on the scarred kitchen table. The house, typically noisy with traffic and college life, seemed to hold its breath. The silence was heavy, absolute. The dialogue with Evelyn at 1:47 a.m., they sat around the table. 4 pairs of fingers rested lightly on the cold, smooth slate of the planchette. Theo started the invocation, his voice rough with forced mockery. "To any former resident of the annex, or any spectral entity, we politely invite you to make your presence known." The planchette immediately tensed, then began to move with a slow, grinding resistance, heading for the yes marker. Jess gasped, pulling her hand away reflexively. The planchette did not falter, held steady by Theo, Ben, and Clara. "If you are a spirit," Clara asked, her voice a thin, reedy sound, "what is your name?" The planchette moved with deliberate, powerful speed to spell the name Evelyn. Ben's eyes went wide. Evelyn. The missing student, 1957. The history major was right. "Evelyn, are you trapped here?" Theo asked. The planchette snapped to the word here, then moved to the moon symbol and circled it 3 times, a slow, mesmerizing pattern. "Why are you here, Evelyn?" Clara asked, her eyes fixed on the planchette. The answer was immediate, fast, and chillingly specific. The planchette shot across the board to spell "they took it." "Took what?" Theo pressed, a cold dread replacing his skepticism. The planchette rushed to the numbers 1957, pointed again to the moon, and quickly moved to spell "hidden." Something was hidden in 1957, Jess concluded, leaning forward. The planchette began to move erratically, violently shaking as if struggling against a powerful current. The candles flickered wildly. It paused only to spell the word wrong. Then, the final, terrifying piece of the initial communication. The planchette slammed itself onto Theo's hand, the edge of the slate cutting a thin line into his skin. It quickly moved back to the letters, spelling "you lied to Maya." Theo froze. Maya was his sister. A personal betrayal known only to him and her. The physical strike and the secret knowledge were the proof. The planchette retreated to the center of the board and came to rest. Theo stared at the thin red line on his hand, the violation of his innermost reality. The missing piece. The next day, Theo was a wreck. He tried to burn the board, but the wood would not catch. The existing burn marks only seemed to deepen, radiating a faint, internal heat. Jess confirmed the history. Evelyn Vance was reported missing in March 1957. Her police record noted that her recovered journal cover was missing a small, hand-stitched piece. The entity was not just a trapped ghost, it was a ghost with a goal. That evening, the haunting began in earnest. Ben saw his reflection in the old hall mirror twist into a grinning, emaciated version of himself, holding up one finger as if showing the one missing piece. In the dead of night, Theo awoke to a scratching sound. He opened the panel where they had found the board. Nothing was inside, but scratched into the raw plaster was a fresh, deep etching, a single, distorted sketch of the SUN symbol from the board. We reconvened, desperate, unable to sleep. We set up the board again, this time with frantic determination. Evelyn, where is the missing piece of your journal cover? Theo demanded. The planchette moved instantly, without hesitation. It didn't spell words, but rather a path. It moved from the sun to the number 1, then to the letter P, then to the goodbye marker, and finally slid off the edge of the table and clattered onto the floor. Sun, 1, P, goodbye, Jess repeated, confused. Ben's eyes were fixed on the worn carpet. The basement. The only place the sun never hits. It pointed to P, pillar. Pillar 1. The foundation and the price. The basement of the annex was a sprawling, subterranean labyrinth, damp and choked with dust. Following the logic of the board, they found the third concrete pillar. It wasn't monolithic. It had a strange, square patch of mismatched concrete near its base, a clumsy repair job. This is it, Jess said, running her hand over the rough surface. Someone patched something up, something old. Using a borrowed hammer and chisel, the 4 students worked in grim silence. The air filled with the gritty smell of old concrete and the faint, persistent scent of old perfume. Eventually, the patch gave way, revealing a small, dark void. Ben reached in and pulled out a small, sealed, copper cylinder. It was cold, wet, and heavy. They hauled it upstairs. The moment the cylinder touched the wood of the kitchen table, the board's letters seemed to shimmer under the candlelight. Theo cracked the seal and opened the cylinder. It wasn't fabric. Inside was a single, meticulously preserved human tooth, held rigid inside a tiny, embroidered square of crimson fabric, the missing piece of the journal cover. A moment of absolute, bone-deep horror settled over the room. Evelyn had been murdered, and a part of her was intentionally encased in the house's foundation. Just as the silence peaked, the planchette, which they hadn't touched, lifted itself. It rose an inch above the board, hovered, and then dropped back down, moving with final, furious speed to spell freed. Theo sagged against the counter. It's over. We found the piece. She's free. Ben reached for the box, intending to seal the board forever. But the planchette moved one final, devastating time. It skipped over the goodbye and raced to the center of the board, spelling the last word that Evelyn, or whatever entity, intended to convey, now incomplete. The planchette rose one last time, turning midair, and then, impossibly, it flew across the table and struck Clara's forehead with a sharp, sickening crack. Clara screamed. A high, unnatural sound that broke off sharply. She didn't fall. She stood rigid, her eyes wide, staring blankly ahead. The room plunged into an immediate, absolute silence. Ben rushed to her side. Clara, are you okay? Talk to me. Clara didn't blink. Her expression was now flat, cold, and utterly vacant. She reached up and gently touched the tiny, bleeding cut on her forehead where the slate had hit. Then, she turned her head slowly, looking at Theo, then Ben, then Jess. Her lips curved into a smile that held no warmth and too much history. She spoke, her voice flat and gravelly, like dry leaves scraping pavement. It wasn't Clara's voice. "Thank you," the voice hissed, echoing slightly in the small kitchen. "The annex always requires 4 pieces to be truly complete." Clara, or Evelyn, or whatever had been waiting, turned and walked slowly out of the kitchen, down the hallway, and toward the front door. She never looked back. The front door clicked shut with a soft finality, sealing the horror inside the walls with us. Theo looked down at the table. The copper cylinder was gone, and the Ouija board, the handmade piece of burned wood, was now completely blank. All the letters, numbers, and symbols had been scrubbed away, leaving only smooth, virgin wood. The annex was quiet again. Too quiet. We had solved a 60-year-old murder and, in doing so, had only secured a new, living replacement piece for the monster that still haunted the foundation. Clara was gone, and the cold that now settled in the kitchen was the terrible, absolute certainty that we were now 3 pieces short of the next complete tragedy. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment and turn on notifications if you enjoyed the video so you never miss an upload.